This might sound really controversial, what I'm going to say here, but I love a bit of controversy. You know that, Luca.
Absolutely, mate, absolutely.
But with Graham Potter, I was speaking to someone about this the other week. I know he did a pretty decent job at Brighton, but I think people are making him a lot better than he really is, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
Um, because of his experience with Chelsea, it showed that there's still a lot of tr- learning that he needs to do for trade of football, I suppose, especially with bigger egos and that. But Brighton, I mean, I was looking at his statistics, I think it was, and his win ratio wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I think he still lost more games than he won games at Brighton, if I recall seeing the stats right. So quote me if I'm wrong and everything like that, that's fine. But it's just, it was. I can see why Chelsea did because there was all that talk. But yeah, you could say an up and coming manager. He's doing for Sweden job at the moment. Um, it'd be interesting how he does with Sweden. I think there'll be that bit of connections there after what he did with Östersunds, however you say it. Um, but it's if he was being linked with the England job if Tuchel left, I'd be a bit concerned.
I think that's what he was holding out for before he went to West Ham originally when Southgate left. I think he was holding out for the England job, and he was in his own right to do that, right? Because you're English, you got the prospect of being linked with the national team. If there's a chance to step up, you're going to do that, right? And it didn't come round for him, so then I think he ended up taking the West Ham job because, again, it's still appealing to be in the Premier League and to try and prove yourself and then being with a shout for that job, especially if, you got Eddie Howe's consistently in the Premier League now as well, and he's going to be part of your competition. But when I was talking about Liam Rosenior to you, I think Liam Rosenior would be on a long list of future England managers. I don't think right now, but I think he should be on the list somewhere.
Mm.
And I think Lampard should be on that list somewhere as well, in realistic terms of what he can do with the young players and the fact that he is having success, and hopefully he can prove himself in terms of that. But then if you've got Graham Potter on there, if you were to say Tuchel's leaving tomorrow, who'd you go for? Then hopefully, I don't think Graham Potter deserves to be on that list. I think he's a good manager. And again, there's always that argument. It's the way that you've looked at the Brighton statistics, right? Um, it's the same when you speak to some Swansea fans. He didn't quite achieve at Swansea either, and he should have pushed Swansea up and got them promoted, but he never. But then he was lucky to have had that jump at Brighton. And again, he's done. He did a good job at Brighton and put them in a good position. But then so did the Zerbi, and now Hughes Hirtzler's there. So, but I don't think Graham Potter is in the bracket to be in a shout for the England job with his current and recent performances. And as you say there, I don't think his stats, compare him to someone like Tuchel. So if you've gone from a world class manager trying to achieve that success, which I know we just spoke about with United, how then can you go to a manager like Graham Potter, for example?
Yeah, I think this is it. Is I look at Potter's background as we've just talked about for clubs. You look at all right. Let's talk about the three Premiership clubs that he's been at. Then Brighton, West Ham, and Chelsea. Chelsea, you could say they have an abundance of finances. So one way or another, you could say that he's had a lot of budget behind him to get something clicking. Didn't really work out. He then went to the polar opposite with West Ham. That, as we said earlier, with finances are not for best and for most astute. So he's gone from riches to for poor, if you can say that in that respect. So he's not been able to get anything clicking from that respect. And then you look at Brighton, that's in between that bracket, that are a very sustainable club. And if you still can't get a tune out of that as such in terms of statistics, if you go down that path, then it just makes you query what is it that he's lacking then? Is it his leadership style? Is it his actual coaching that he needs to be a bit sharper with personnel or whatever? It's something's got to. I think he's got to work on a few things to before he even is merited with potentially the England job.
Absolutely, mate, and I think that's exactly how it should be, and I think that's the point which I think is really prominent there. Is if you're going to step up into a big job like that, you have to have the merits to do it, and I don't think Graham Potter's there right now. And I think when you look at the kind of job which he's doing with Sweden, okay, you can now argue that he's got the international experience, and he's obviously going to take on that job because at the time he was out of work. It's great to try and get involved with the national team. It's great to have that job experience to jump back in, and he's going to want to utilize that position to try and rebuild himself and try and give himself that reputation. Obviously, then to try and have some success on the national level as well, just to have that behind him. But when you look at his success there, right, he's only managed 2 games since October, so it's a bit hard to create this argument over a 5-month period. And he's only managed the 2 games, but he's drawn one and lost one. Now I know we can't look into that too much. He only has the squad for a short period of time when he's at it. He obviously hasn't been with the squad since then, so it's going to be interesting to see the type of work which he does with the national team. But he's only 54 more losses or 54 more wins than he's had losses in his career, 42% win ratio overall.
I mean, 42. I mean, how do you interpret that? Do you interpret that as pretty reasonable for professional football, or still below? I'd say that's still on the low side, really, considering what you're trying to look for an England manager. I mean, I don't know what Eddie Howe's statistics are, right? But you could say at least Eddie Howe has proved in this last season or two his merits as such that he's managed to get Newcastle fighting to compete in the top half of the Premier League. He's managed to keep with the same nucleus of a squad, but he got them a League Cup trophy last season, which cups really are everything, aren't they? Because it stands out on CV. But he's even got them competing in the Champions League of the biggest games at home, and even PSG away, they managed to get a draw, which is European champions at the moment. So I think there's little things in there that Eddie Howe has earned his stripes, got his merits somewhat, to show and say, look, this is what I've done. Whereas I can't really say with Graham Potter, where does that come from?